attempting to go to where they killed my son at. As you can see, the road is clearly washed out. This is 28 miles up from Gold Country Casino. And if there's such a thing as revenge from the other side, if you live up here and you murdered my son, good luck getting home. There's a big old hole in this ground right here. It's the most craziest thing I've ever seen. You drive up here, drive past Gold Country Casino, 28 miles, and look at the hole in this ground. They killed my son 2 miles from up here for no reason. There was no reason to kill that kid who was going to Chico State. His career, his whole life is ahead of him. You robbed me, my family, the students of Chico State, students at Butte College. He was with the public. He was helping everyone. He was the multicultural president. I mean, there's no reason. There's no reason.
He had came over that day about 2:30, as I recall, and didn't seem in no rush or any hurry. I remember us talking about something. I don't remember quite what, but I know I was on the couch and he came in talking about he was looking for one of his school books that had come in the mail, and I remember a book came in the mail, so I showed him where it was, and we talked a little bit. He said he was going to casinos. He didn't really say what for. He just said, because he always went to casinos, so I just figured it was normal. About 10 to 45, 11 o'clock, I'm in bed. I hear a knock at the door. It's the detectives. I'm wondering what they're there for. They didn't really give me specifics for their visit still. That's kind of how the frustration built up. They're asking me questions about me and, about my whereabouts. And then probably after they were about 15 minutes, and they finally said, well, we found your brother's car. And then I was like, no, that didn't tell me much, I mean, his car, probably at the casino or something. It was like, oh, there's a body in the car. So at that point in time, being familiar with the law that I am, I instantly stopped talking. He gave me his card and, just left. I instantly called my mom, my dad, told them what they had said. It wasn't much information to go on. I mean, it wasn't like, it was just basically they was looking for him.
My initial contact with the law enforcement authorities was that night they called me around 11:30, and I met with them about 12 midnight. They were just asking a lot of questions, when the last time I seen him, and things like that. They weren't that bad. And the next morning, I got around 8 o'clock and went straight to Orville, and the officers that morning, they were like, I don't know if you want to say mean or whatnot, but they were not very helpful. They were wanting to know, why would you want to go up there? I mean, there's nothing up there. Why do you want to go there? Because you say my son's missing, his car's ablaze. Of course I'm going to go up there. I want to go up there and look around. I'm going to go look for him. When I first came around the corner, you could see the yellow tape, which we went under, and we could see some firefighters. They were still there. They were like off to the right, just like chitty-chatting, but then you could see where the image of where the car was, and it was still smoldering on the ground. And it was not a good feeling. It was very horrible, and it was not a good feeling at all.
The death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in Florida in 2012 and acquittal of his killers, George Zimmerman, is considered to be the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. In August of 2014, unarmed teenager Michael Brown was killed by Officer Darren Wilson outside of an apartment complex in Ferguson, Missouri. Mark Thompson's extremely horrific death in the hills above Oroville, California, happened barely a month later in the spiraling epidemic of violence.
When I heard that Mark was, quote, missing, I was on the sidewalk of the shopping West Sacramento Ave Safeway Shopping Center. When it came over my Facebook on the phone, like, has anyone seen Mark, for like days? And I was walking to Safeway, I live not far from there, to get some food, and I'm like, what the hell? So I text him, and I'm in doing some shopping, and it's been like 15, 20 minutes. And so I call him, because Mark never refuses my call. and it goes to voicemail. And at that point, I'm out of that store and I'm walking, I'm calling Manoir, I'm calling Melissa, I'm calling Julie, I am calling, does anyone know where Mark is? And it wasn't until the next day that I heard that his car had been found in this place out towards Oroville, torched. And I'm kind of like, okay. And they said they did have a body. And I'm kind of like, for me, I'm like, no. He lent his car to somebody. Something else happened.
I was laying in the bed just watching the movie, I remember. And so next thing I know, I'm talking to my son. And he's telling me how the police had came up, banging on the door, asking him about Mark. Not saying that, you know, we have found his car or anything like that, but saying, do you know where your brother is? And so his first thing is, I'm protecting my brother. And, you know, because the way they're coming at me, it's like maybe he did something, they're after him to arrest him or something like that. And so he was kind of, no, I don't know where he is. No, you know, and this, that, and the other, you know. And he said it took him a while before they told him that they found his car and it was on fire.
And that night, actually, I was working and I got a call and they told me, hey, they found Mark's car and we don't really know anything, but they didn't want me to find out through like the Facebook or anything like that.
I thought it was just some spot on the side of the road. No, this was in a real abandoned lot. Like, I don't even know how a person would even know this location unless you have to live in the area to know where this particular location is. There were containers on the scene that looked like they could have been used as some sort of fuel for the aid of combustion. I mean, there was oil, empty oil containers, you know, things there that you might like, hey, look twice at. Maybe this was, you know, you might want to take it, bag it, or something, you know.
And then he was missing and people didn't know what was going on. And then I think a couple days later, there was this article about they found the car. I didn't believe it, to be honest. And it was just like horrible that people were even considering that it was Mark.
I had just gotten into bed. It was about 11 o'clock, 11:30, and I got a message on Facebook Messenger, I think it was, from, Jessica. It might have been from one of the other gals. Anyway, they said they were concerned because Mark was missing. We were all kind of messaging each other, who saw him last, you know, what did anybody know? And then at some point somebody learned, I believe it was that same night, I mean sometimes it's a bit of a blur, but I believe it was that same night that somebody said they had just found his body burned in a car on Highway 70 or somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And of course we were all, you know, chattering, freaking out, trying to find out was it true or not. And of course by the next morning it had been verified. And it was just, you know, it was just such a shock. I mean, we couldn't figure out what had happened. How did he, I mean, it seemed quite obvious that it was a homicide. I mean, he was found burned in his car on this road in the middle of nowhere. He didn't do that to himself, obviously.
I was living back in Orville. I was just about finished with my LVN, and I get a text message from Lisa saying, I believe it was Lisa saying, have you heard anything? And I was like, no. And then I got a phone call from Foxy. And then I believe this is how it happened. And then they told me what happened, and I was like, no, I knew about somebody dying in a car, because I seen that in the news and stuff, but it couldn't have been Mark. Like, that's my brain. My brain was, nope, somebody else, not him.
I remember I came and talked to my partner, and of course then I had a couple students call me who were like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no information. I just remember being frustrated because the first thing I thought, of course, was someone killed him for many reasons. He's a black man in America. I mean, goodness. Then we're in Chico. And then it's Mark. You know, Mark's not scared. He would, go off on an officer if they, disrespected his rights or whatever, Mark's the type of person, he knew what his rights were. He knows those things. So he wasn't going to let anyone challenge him in that kind of way. And so that's the first thing my mind jumped to, which made it worse because I'm like, I'm hoping that's not it. And so then as, news comes out and they're like, he was burned on the side of the freeway. Just a lot of questioning, a lot of wondering, like, obviously it's murder.
We were all just like stunned, like what happened? And of course, there wasn't any information coming from any of the law enforcement, either the sheriff or the police.
People started to message me, asking me, had I heard anything, if I would communicate to members of law enforcement because of my position on campus to find out if they could find out anything else because certain things weren't coming out, questions weren't being answered, that type of thing. I'm originally from Compton, California, where unfortunately where I resided, not all of Compton, California is that way, but there was a lot of violence and things happened. So in regards to the level of information that was provided to us, I wasn't surprised by it because I lived that.
I learned about Mark's passing from Trey Robinson. I was dumbstruck. I remember I had to leave the office and by myself and just go to the creek and ask the why.
At the time of Mark's murder, his mother had been living in Florida. She arrived several days after Mark's car had been discovered. There had been an autopsy, but no positive DNA confirmation.
It was probably a little over a week or so later that when I got there, I hit California and hit Orville that they told me that, yes, it was Mark Anthony. And I said, well, how do you know? Like that. And, they told me about tattoos. That's how they said he had some tattoos, and they were able to identify some tattoos. First, they asked me, did he have tattoos? And I said, yes, And then they said, well, that's pretty much, they said, we won't know anything until dentals and all of that sort of thing. And so the next day, I go in to meet the detectives with my ex-husband, and they just go in. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. It just seemed like they tried to horrify me or something, telling me about his burnt body and how he's, this, that, and the other. And they didn't even tell me they said they think he may have been shot. They didn't even know. And that it seemed like it may be gang related. Was he in a gang and drugs and this? And the whole time, I'm sitting there like this, and you got these two detectives over there just like they're trying to horrify me with my son, telling me what he looked like, telling me what he, And I'm just like, it kind of upset me, And I got angry, and I kind of lashed back at saying, you're not going to sit here and horrify me. I said, by telling me every single little detail about how my son died. I said, if you want to horrify me, I said, you horrify me by telling me who did it, why, and find who actually, excuse me. find who actually burnt him and left him there suffering. So I told him, I told him that would be horrific for me. I said, because after all, you guys are Butte County Sheriff. I said, but anyway, I was really upset. You get upset sometimes, you're not sure, things just kind of roll out, and so my husband, ex-husband, kind of took it from there. He saw I was getting upset, and I was really trying not to break in front of him. It's just the whole thing. It just didn't seem right to me. It didn't seem right the way they were coming, telling me that, but.
You don't have to look too hard to find the spot where Mark Thompson's body was found, inside a burned Ford Taurus in a turnout off Oro Quincy Highway, just past Mountain House. Ribbons mark the spot, and remnants of the car, like a strip of tire and a piece of glass from a side mirror, still remain. Investigators are still trying to put the pieces together more than 3 months after his death was ruled a homicide. The sheriff's office has set up a website, ButteCrimeSolver.com. 3 ways to submit a tip, anonymously if you want, with the possibility of a $1,000 reward through the Butte County Secret Witness Program.
At this point, we're closely monitoring the website, and any information that comes to us, we'll evaluate and determine whether or not those are viable leads, and if so, we'll follow up on them.
Mark was born in March 12, 1989 in Orville, California, to me, Lawrence Thompson, and my wife, LaWanda Taylor. Mark was a real heavy child. He was a big baby to begin with, and I was very happy that he was a boy. It was quite, we waited to the last. We didn't want him to tell. We wanted to be surprised, and so I was so glad it was a boy.
Mark was he was my baby. He was the third, and he was the last, and he was a big baby. So they had to keep him in the hospital for a couple of weeks, being about 9-10 pounds, so yeah. He was also born deaf, but they did not know that at the time. So during his childhood years, I'd say baby years, he had a series of operations and things like that for his hearing, and he overcame all of that. And I think that handicap, when he was a baby and during his younger years, made him appreciate people, all people. He was a happy baby, a happy child, with his brother and his sister. He was always, his laugh was contagious.
Mark was a very, very strong-willed child. Mark did what Mark wanted to do, and there wasn't really much you could do about it, but just keep counseling and talking to him. But overall, he was a really good kid, He played football for the Orville Rhinos, a lineman. He was a very good player. But when he started out, to make him an even better player, I told him, if you're going to play football, you have to be a student of the game. He goes, what do you mean by that, Dad? I mean, you have to get books, go to the library, read up on it. If you're going to be a lineman, quarterback, whatever you do, you have to be a student of the game. And then don't just work out at practice. You got to practice for yourself. I used to do sports in high school. I told him, I said, you start running for yourself. You don't run just because you're at practice. When you get off practice, OTI, opportunity to improve. Do it for yourself, and you're going to be a much better player. He liked to play poker. I taught all my kids and all my nieces and all my nephews, we'd have poker games all the time. I taught them all how to play expertly. I mean, any one of those, my nieces or nephews could play on any table with anybody at any time. Even when they were really young kids, one funny story, I won a hand and he didn't believe it. He was 12. He called the local poker parlor to ask him what hand beat, which had a greater hand. He didn't believe that he actually lost that hand, but he was quite comical. I thought that was pretty funny that he actually called them and asked them. To make them smarter and brighter, I love Jeopardy, so I would always challenge them as kids to beat me in Jeopardy. So they'd be waiting for me. Dad, Jeopardy's on. Jeopardy's coming in a few minutes. So they tried to get me in there. They just wanted to beat me in Jeopardy. So that was one of their aspirations.
Mark's parents divorced, and Mark spent his K through high school years going between Orville and Livermore, California, and an early year in Mississippi. He tried door-to-door sales and spent some time working for a catering service before deciding to go to Butte Community College outside of Oroville.
You know, like I said, we were Black Student Union at Butte College, and it was funny because when I took over as the leader of that program, I had a view of we're the Black Student Union, but we're not just for African Americans that go to the school. So out of nowhere, Mark was involved and said, that's exactly what I was thinking we should be about. So our campaign wasn't to go after all of the African American students, we went after any student. So it became more of a multicultural kind of club. And a few times we'd be sitting out on the lawn or whatever, talking, having our little booth, and some students would come up, some non-Black students would come up and say, well, why would I want to be a part of this? And we would say, why not? This is the best way for you to learn about what African Americans feel is to sit at a table with them.
How Mark entered my life, I remember the exact moment. I was at the Cultural Community Center at Butte College, and I came in to see Gisela and Foxy, who were working there, and I usually did homework there when I was, it was my freshman year of college. And I walked in and I sat down, and he immediately came over to me and was like, hello, who are you? What's your name? What's going on? What's your story? And I was like, oh my gosh, who is this person? Mark was definitely the mama of the group. He would always make sure everyone was acknowledged. There was always a space at the table for someone in Mark's life. And if you were part of that, he would make you feel welcome. You would have food, you would have conversation, you would be comfortable.
Mark would just come over to my place, my apartment, and he would cook. He'd go into my pantry, my roommates' pantries. He would just put things together and cook. He'd make all these elaborate meals, and if you would just watch him in the kitchen, he'd just grab spice here, stuff here, and just make a meal. And we would never even thought of putting things together, and it was always so good.
And he loved to cook for people.
Oh yeah, he loved to cook.
How did he get into that?
That was from my grandma. His love of cooking came from my grandma. I don't think it was intentional because she meant to pass it on to my cousin, one of my girl cousins, but they didn't pick it up. They don't cook or nothing like that. And even though it isn't so much as the recipes, it's the passion for it. You know, it's her passion. She always loved to cook and just dabble with these ingredients. Even if she doesn't have a recipe, it come together. That's how he was. He figured everything out. Like my grandma had a secret gumbo recipe. He figured it out, you know, cracked the code, and he passed it to me, and then I know how to still make it. We sit in the kitchen, he cooked. Like many Thanksgivings we've had just me and him. Like my mom was gone, the whole family was gone. We'd be on top of a hill somewhere by ourselves, just, you know, and he cooked. Like if it wasn't a turkey, he could make Cornish hens. If it wasn't Cornish hens, he'd do the ham and all the, he invented things, you know. Like if it didn't seem like it made a meal, it would make a meal. That's just how our upbringing was. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't always, you know, a lot of stuff, you know, around. So we had to make do with what we had. You know, mom worked late, you know, dad lived across the country, so it would be me, him, and my sister. And instead of my sister stepping up, he would step up and just make the oddest things. I mean, you know, for my mom and grandma, you even had a soup called hobo stew. It was some stew he made called hobo stew. It was the best stew you could ever make. Better than beef stew, better than clam chowder. I don't know, but yeah, he can cook, and he liked to cook for people.
I had returned to school later in life, and I was going to Butte College, and I was in a class with Mark, and he sat in the back, but you knew he was there every day. Same type of thing that some of you've probably heard from some of his other professors, that he was such a force. He had a brilliant mind, and he was unapologetic about sharing his opinions, and he was provocative. He wanted people to think. He wanted people to examine their own beliefs, and he wanted everyone to question everything. So we got to know each other through classes. We worked on projects together. At one point, we were in the BSU together. We worked together passionately about social justice issues. We helped create the Culture and Community Center on Butte College's campus. They didn't previously have one, so that was exciting, and we got to work in that, that space together. And he was so welcoming. He did. He made people feel comfortable and at home and included. He never wanted anyone to feel left out. Mark was so much fun to go out with. He was just graceful. He was poetry in motion, and he danced so many different styles. Ballroom, he took ballroom at Butte College, and he was elegant. But then he also loved the Cupid Shuffle, very current dances. During a week at Butte College, he led a group of students in that dance in the middle of the school, and it was just so inviting. You know, he had people with no rhythm out there, but everyone was laughing, everyone was smiling.
Mark listened to probably everything when it came to music. So he listened to rap the way rap was supposed to be. He listened to country the way country was supposed to. He was a music dude. So, you know, when you knew Mark, you knew it's not just this. It's where you're gonna go. Like, it's like an adventure. Where are we going today? Because something strange or something new may come from it.
Being with Mark, being his friend, definitely changed my outlook on activism and social justice. He and I were both, he was so smart. He had already gotten one degree. I forget what I think it was in a social degree. I forget what it was, sociology. And then he was also getting a second degree in multicultural and gender studies, and I was getting the same degree. And so we had only just touched on that aspect of our relationship when he passed. So I always regret not being able to graduate with him.
One of my best things I could say about Mark, I'm a single father, and I was having a hard time going to school, working full time, and taking care of 3 kids. So I was sitting down one day and I was just, you know, I could feel the frustration on me, but never thought I showed it. Mark comes over to me, he sits down, he's like, "What's going on? I know you're troubled." And I go, "Yeah, you know, just life. You know, I don't know if I'm doing what I should do for my children." And he kind of had this thing where he didn't have kids, but you know, when in a lot of communities they say he has an old soul. Mark had a very old soul. And he would just say to me, he'd say, "The only way your kids are ever gonna understand what you're trying to do is you gotta keep doing what you've been doing. You gotta work hard so that they see how hard you work, and then they're just gonna work that much harder. So you gotta be that role model for them, but don't hinder them. Let them still be themselves. Let them grow up and experience things and know." So Mark was big on, this is what the ghetto looks like, this is what life can look like. Where do you wanna be in that area? You can figure out where you wanna be and be comfortable with whatever area you're in. So when I say helping me to become a stronger father and stuff, Mark helped me as one of my mentors. He not only was I'm a mentor of his, he was a mentor of mine in certain areas too. So that was like a blessing to have.
My passion for diversity was random and not at all planned out. It started a few years ago when a professor pulled me out of a crowd and sent me on a journey I would never forget.
In 2010, Mark was selected to participate in the powerful documentary, If These Halls Could Talk, directed by diversity expert Lee Manoir. Mark was one of the 11 college students from all over the USA of varying ethnicities and races brought together in a filmed 4-day retreat to discuss the dynamic issues of race. The experience had a profound impact on Mark.
So Mark, what's missing in this group?
Anger. Anger's missing. You gotta leave yourself at the door. You gotta get disrespected for wearing a veil. You know, you're mad. We know you're hurt. You know, we know what it's like to be sad, but you're mad. You know, you're mad at America for tricking you into believing that we were something we weren't. You're mad at the schools for putting someone who looks just like you on their cover to get someone just like you to get there so they can keep doing it again. You're mad. We don't see it.
So Mark, why don't you join us up here?
I didn't choose black skin, you didn't choose white skin, but we got it. So this is what we gotta do. You gotta work without anything in return. You gotta be a slave in a sense, for free. Mm-hmm. You gotta do it, or else we're gonna keep getting mad. You know, they say, oh, the people blacks are hurting themselves. No, whites are getting hurt too. That man that looked just like me 300 years ago went through it every night. Afraid to wake up in the morning. Afraid to wake up in the morning, you know? Have you ever prayed for the next moment not to come?
No.
That shit sucks, man. It's like, I want to freeze it. I just want to freeze it. Because I don't want that next moment to come. Because somebody who looked like you was going to do something fucked up. And you know how they knew they were? Because they did it yesterday. They did it the day before. They did it maybe 5 minutes ago. I'm gonna be mad until standard American English is not the norm. I'm gonna be mad until there's a $2,000 bill with a bunch of black people on it. We turned the word nigger into a term of endearment for ourselves. You know how hard that gotta be? So I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna be mad, but I'm not gonna be stupid.
The way he speaks in it, that was him. Mark spoke with such passion, and he was very passionate about everyone's rights, what was fair, what's not fair. And he wasn't afraid to say what he felt, what he believed in.
Mark entered my life when I first met him. I went to a diversity summit at Butte College, actually. I was a student at Chico State at the time, and we had done a diversity summit at our cross-cultural leadership center, and their cultural center, I believe it's called, was trying to do something similar. And so we went there to kind of support and connect with some Butte College students who were on a similar mindset. And when we walked in, one of the first activities we did, they asked us to go find someone else in the room that you didn't know that you wanted to know more about. And as I scan the room, I see Mark with a do-rag on, sagging pants, and a baggy t-shirt. So I was like, I'm interested, of course. I'm like, okay, I want to know more. So I went up to him. We ended up being partners. And I can't recall what we talked about, but I know from the first time that I met him, I could tell that he was very intelligent. He had a lot to say. He had a lot to share. He wasn't, it was funny that he never really allowed people's perception of him, because he knew what he looked like. He got dressed every day, so he knew. But he never allowed that perception to like deter what he wanted to like speak with you about. So if we were talking about diversity, feminism, racism, whatever, it's like his appearance and all those kind of things didn't even matter. It was like out of the picture. And so I really, that was one of the things that intrigued me the most about Mark, was his ability to kind of just ignore self, I guess, in some ways, and really focus on the things that he was most passionate about, but then also be very comfortable in himself enough that it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, he was gonna be him. He's gonna wear his do-rag, his colorful clothes. He didn't he didn't care what situation. If everybody were wearing tuxedos, that's what they wanted to do. He's not gonna wear that. He's gonna wear a do-rag with his colorful hat and his shirt. You know, nobody's gonna get it, but he's gonna be him. You know, he is unapologetic about the way he dressed. You know, he went outside comfortable. You know, and that's what I think people were supposed to do. You know, just be comfortable in your skin. You know, and that's what you could take from him, what you could learn from her. That's a lot of problems is just people aren't comfortable. You just gotta cope with who you are and how you are, and that's what he was good at. You know, he'd be in that clothes and people would second guess him, but then you sit with him and, you know, realize this person could be your best friend, you know, if you give him a chance. Even the higher ups, they didn't like the dress, but they had to respect how he was businesslike in those clothes. So even though he wasn't wearing the suit, he was businesslike, like he was wearing the suit.
Soon after participating in the diversity documentary and retreat, Mark transferred to California State University in Chico. Again, he was in many clubs, an active volunteer and mentor. He was elected commissioner of the Multicultural Affairs Council for the Associated Students. He had an early morning job as a groundskeeper on campus. He interacted with many, including the Chico State president.
He walked into my office one day, and this was soon after he arrived on the campus. And he announced himself to my receptionist that he was a new student and he wanted to meet the president. Well, I have a standing policy that never turns students away. I mean, if I'm involved in a meeting, we have to reschedule. But on that particular occasion, I was between meetings. So I was informed that there was this new student who wanted to meet me. I said, terrific, send him in. So he came in, shook hands, sat down, and I never talk to people across a desk. It's always like it would be a conversation like you and I are having. So the first question he asked me is, people tell me I should meet you. Why do you think that's the case? I said, well, maybe because they think that you can help me and I can help you. That's the way it started. And our relationship was like that for about 3 years. Always intense, but in a positive way. I mean, Mark could definitely intimidate folks, but he was also incredibly respectful. And he had the ability to recognize that maybe he was pushing someone to a place of being uncomfortable where it got, really, really edgy. He did want to push folks, and he was very good at recognizing the point where pushing became a negative encounter rather than a positive experience for both folks. I always felt that Mark was aware of not only the necessity of truth-telling, but the obligation to tell the truth. And I think that's why when he was involved in conversations, which may have been, edgy and tense, he was aware of the point when the value of the conversation might diminish. And so he did not want to threaten or to embarrass, folks with whom he was interacting. And I think that came from a very deep sense of the power of respect. So within Mark, you had a commitment to civility, civil discourse, that was fundamentally focused on the power of reason, fundamentally focused on the power of truth-telling, and then always respectful. So if you put those three elements together, reason, respect, civility, that's a pretty good combination of values that I think would have served him and everyone he touched for a life that did not happen.
When he transferred to Chico State, and he became involved in a ton of things, which the first, of course, was the Multicultural Affairs Council, which he and I both sat on as council members, or I don't know what the language is, but we sat on that council, which it's on Chico State's campus to approve or to fund cultural student organizations who are trying to do events on campus, providing a service to the campus. And so there's a group of students who sit there, we watch the presentations, and then we either approve or deny parts of their program. And so that was a fun experience with Mark as well, because every year you kind of get to choose as your council what things you do want to approve. So some years there's more sustainable councils. Maybe they don't want to fund balloons because that's a waste of energy or resources, and they're not very sustainable, not recyclable, those kind of things. Other years maybe people may not care as much. And so we had a lot of debates about the things that we were and were not comfortable with. And oftentimes it was Mark who was very comfortable voicing his opinion about, what we should do as a council, and having those conversations and having to use Robert's Rules of Order and having those conversations was fun because not all of us are very versed in that. And so it was definitely a fun time, like just navigating all of that. And I think as I kind of left that area and I saw him continue on into the commissioner seat in that next year, I was very excited to see what he would do with the position as a Black man on campus. And the Multicultural Affairs Council, we had been having struggles with specifically Black student organizations feeling comfortable getting funding from the council because of past like tensions and things. And so as he kind of moved in there, my hope was that we had this strong Black male that was going to be in this position to support these student organizations and continue to make sure that they had the ability to show their identity, their culture, and their presence on campus. And of course, he did all of those things. He definitely was, in my time, one of the best commissioners that I saw on the MAC Council because he pushed very hard to just make sure that people on our campus were aware of the diversity that we had.
I hope to one day become a professor where I can instill my passion into the next generation and hopefully become the change I wish to see in the world.
The things we did was to try to look into this because we felt like, and from everything we could hear, that this was a controversial case. Even at the table, there were some people that believed he was killed for one reason or the other, you know what I'm saying, and they all differed. So it really seems like this was a very, very popular and loved person, has a lot of people in his corner looking out for him, and they all have their own ideas of what went down with him. Because at this point, the best thing that they have going, and I'm speaking of the Sheriff's Department, for their record so far is a drug deal gone bad. So I don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's not a final. That's one of the things that I know that they have down there. You know what I'm saying?
One of the detectives who was investigating Mark's murder, you know, had called me and was like, well, was Mark into Molly? And, you know, me being some countrified white kid out in the middle of nowhere, I had to go look it up. Oh, you're talking about methamphetamines. Oh, okay. Yeah, Mark didn't have time for that. Mark was too busy doing clubs, doing projects, doing homework, you know, and so and Mark was a good enough friend that if I had seen those issues arriving, I could have gone to him, but I didn't.
I understand the way they would have taken the case where if he was another color, things like that, I knew they would portray it differently. So it's really heartbreaking when I already know that the reason things happen, the way they handled this case, and I do believe it's because he was Black. And they did stereotype, and they did ask me questions. And I think they tried to make it so, I think they were really gearing towards the fact that that he was in drugs and things like that. So they wanted to just blame it really quick. But I know for a fact that everyone told the same story, that he didn't do any hard drugs, he wasn't involved in any gang violence. He was a really nice guy. He was my friend, my mentor. You know, like, he was my first friend in Chico. And he's the reason I didn't go home. That first week, the reason I knew which classes to take, where to go find food, and where was what. He showed me everything. I wouldn't be able to go to the school without having some type of memory of him. And he was always around.
I don't know, when he came over, it was a different vibe. When he was there, just you knew you were gonna have a good time. And I think that was at the end of the year. It was like our last party that we had, and we went hard. We played games, we laughed, and sometimes we even made nerdy jokes, but it was so fun. Like, and you wouldn't think of him like that when you first, when you see him. That's not what you would expect, but he was just so fun and lovable, and you were gonna have a good time with him. It was guaranteed. You were gonna laugh and learn something. He broke stereotypes, I think. A lot of times, like, I feel guilty. You know, when you would see him, he was smart. He was a smart, fun person, and he didn't care what
color your skin was, he would talk to you and he would have fun and he would challenge you and he would tell you, like, this is what's up.
There was always this question, like, well, what happened? What happened? And that was the most frustrating thing about it. You know, he was such a figure on campus, and he was so present. And he had just done a video along with some other students for campus, and you know, suddenly he was gone. It was just like, oh my God, how can this be? And one of his good friends was still on campus. He hadn't graduated yet, and so he was the kind of the last of that crew that was still there, and he took it so hard. I mean, he would come into my office just in tears, like trying to make sense of this, you know, as we all were. But, you know, for me to see it so close like that, like this guy was, you know, Mark meant so much to him, and the whole semester was really difficult. I think it was traumatic, certainly far more traumatic for his friends than for me. But it was because of the unknowing, you know, because we didn't see what happened. We couldn't find out what happened. We would call, you know, people would call the police. The police would say, call the sheriff. People would call the sheriff. The sheriff would say, call the police. You know, I actually tried to get the student newspaper to do some more stories on it and to follow up and to bug the police and try to, like, you know, light a fire under this, because it lingered. You know, it's not like, oh, he died one day and then we had our service and then life went on. It was no, because there was always this question, like, what happened and why can't they find out what happened and why do they seem to be dragging their feet? People were grappling for answers. And so that did, you know, that stays with you, you know. I mean, often I would wake up at night and say, God, what happened to Mark? You know, what happened to Mark?
It's still hard, like that's, especially because there's no update. There's no, hey, this, hey, that. And looking at it in the sense of, why did this happen to him? Who possibly could have done it? They're still out there. Knowing the strides he was taking almost made me back away, because was I next?
I think there was a lot of, for me, a little bit of fear, nervousness, because I was also a very outspoken activist about, I specifically in Black Lives Matter and racial issues, but a little bit of nervousness because it's like, okay, what does that mean?
Mark had a lot of friends. He was sort of like a social butterfly. He loved meeting people. He loved being around people. He loved just making people think about anything. You know, he just wanted to be, unintentionally, he just wanted to be part of people's lives. And you know, he was essentially critical and crucial in the development of the community at Chico State. He wanted to be the change, and I don't know, like, I just feel like if this happened to Mark, that he was so active in his community, I don't know, like everybody knew Mark, you know, in sociology, like everybody just knew Mark. I don't know, it just makes you think that if something like this could happen to someone that was so active in the community and like a lot of people just knew and just loved being next to you. I don't know, it's just a horrible thought. I don't know.
Mark's campus communities and friends were still in shock and grieving when his family was hit again with another violent death. Mark's cousin, 25-year-old Desmond Phillips, suffered from mental illness. On March 17, 2017, Desmond's father dialed 911 and asked for help in calming his son, who was in an agitated state. Chico PD arrived and fatally shot Desmond in the presence of his horrified father.
They weren't in trouble with the law kids or getting in trouble or any records or anything like that. They were just good kids, good innocent kids that should have deserved, a chance in life. The way they went, wrong, period.
What happened, Mark's tragedy, did that upset Desmond's emotional balance?
It upset the whole family. Like again, we're very close, and when one hurts, we all hurt. And that's us, like I said, we love everybody. And when one hurts, it hurts. It affects the whole family. Desmond was in denial, just like his father. He was in denial. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to accept it. And many of us didn't. Me, I'm still dealing with it. My little cousin, the way they found him. And what angers me is that it's just like they put it up on the shelf. It's a cold case file. And that's what really, really hurts because, again, as his father said, if it had been someone else, oh yeah, they would have been out there. Someone would have been arrested or they would have investigated it, and it's just like, to me, the way that I'm getting it is that we don't matter to them. You see, we matter just like everyone else matters. I love everyone, and I teach my kids that. My kids teach me that, And Mark taught me a lot, because like I said, he was he come in the room and you could be in there, hell, you might have the flu. But he'd come in the room and he'd brighten you up and you'd be up and doing this. You know what I mean? He was just that type of kid.
We got to provide a safe setting, but we're doing some wonderful things here. In a situation like two young men, especially it being so soon, in the timeline of grief, I personally believe 3 years is still infancy. I personally believe it can still be infancy in the course of the grand scheme. So oftentimes individuals aren't necessarily looking for healing. They're still angry. So they're going to look towards A, individuals who they believe are responsible, or B, the individuals who they believe should be giving them some type of answers.
The case seemed cold to everyone. However, Mark's mother never lost contact with Butte County Sheriff's detectives. LaWanda had returned to Florida, but over the years would continue to pass on tips she received from folks back in Oroville. In August of 2018, she emailed the detectives she would be visiting Oroville in September and looked forward to meeting with them for an update on Mark's case. Once in Oroville, she made an appointment to meet with them.
I met with Detective Hutz and Sergeant Collins September of 2018 and on a Friday, and they were giving me an update on the things, additional information that they had discovered and the people that they had spoken to. Well, their update was actually that they hadn't spoken to anybody. Matter of fact, they even admitted, both Detective Hutz and Sergeant Collins admitted that they hadn't really looked at the entire file yet, hadn't had a chance to look at the entire file yet. I have been in contact with Sergeant Collins, who is about the third detective who has taken over Mark's case since he died in 2014. All these years, even the information that I've provided them, our family has provided them, they say that they have checked out the individuals that we have, that we were told, that was in the vicinity or in some way knew information or had information on Mark's death. They said that they contacted them. They, again, the first center gentleman that we told them about, they said they contacted them for us to stay away. A year later, they asked me about this individual, name and description, and with the sheriffs coming back, emailing me, could you please give me a description and name and everything of this individual, it told me right then and there that they did not follow up. They did not follow through when I gave them that information years ago. That was, again, very, very hurtful. It told me that that they didn't care. Was my son really going to get any justice around here?
Being born and raised in Butte County, I had no confidence that they were going to do anything. Not zero confidence, zero. And then people ask me, you think they're going to catch him? No, I don't think, no, not at all. If priority's not high enough. If it was Mike Ramsey's son or somebody a little higher up, yeah, they most definitely would have did. They think they did a great job. But I tell you what, if they'd have put me on, made me a detective for a day or two, I would have made moves that I think they should have did. Like grab all the records from the cell tower. I want to know every cell phone that was in that area. They got a picture of his car going down the road. I want to know, well, where was the picture of the cars in front of his car? What about a picture of the car behind his car? I want the last 10, 20 cars. I mean, I would have done a lot more. I would act like it was the president's son.
For him to be so young and so inspirational and so definitely hard on, like, go to, this is what it is. I don't care. I'm gonna stand up for women's rights and gay rights and all those things. I definitely was like, yeah, we need that. We definitely need that. It bothers me that we haven't had any closure because there's still someone out there. Is very, very bothersome. I wear his shirt all the time, and it always reminds me that there's someone out there that, is responsible for these things. So it hurts to know that, this young man whose life was taken for no apparent reason, is definitely scary and it's hurtful. And I feel like someone needs to be charged, You have to be held accountable for those things. Mark didn't deserve that.
I don't know. I look out there and I see so many young men of color. They come through my doors on occasion, and I'm like, give yourself permission to be successful. But then I have to look at what happened to Mark, and I'm like, yeah, that's great if society will allow it. I can't speak for his family or the rest of his friends, but yes, was I lucky to know him? Absolutely. I wish I'd have been luckier to have him in my life for a lot longer time. But someone out there, or someone's, we don't know, made a different choice. And I think Mark would still be saying, like, you need to look at them, look at yourself, what are your commonalities? Can you help them? Because the odds are statistically that these were a group of white people. Like, you are the one that has the in on them. You need to address it. And, I wish I could, because it's now a cold case.
From a professional point of view, the psychology of blacks in Southside and in the Oroville community towards law enforcement is one of caution. And the dilemma that they face is, can I trust these people, or should I protect myself against them? That kind of builds up a view of whether or not the police were on your side, or if they were there to intimidate you, and you had to prove to them that you're innocent before they would cut you some slack. So I think overall, there is a approach avoidance psychological condition that is pretty much absorbed by most of the black people here in Oroville about the police. But for the average person that doesn't have a professional connection, and you're just, trying to live. The sense of the police is very suspicious, but the under continual feeling, I believe, is that they are not here to protect you. They are here to protect the dominant group here. What does this symbolize to others who are in his family, others who are close to him, or people who are just sensitive about how this historical pattern of brutality and injustice can continue to happen and it not be a big deal? And in that sense, I think people feel somewhat helpless and hopeless.
Especially young college students, so traumatized
Yeah.
that somebody dear to them, admired, a leader. Honestly, they're all of them are still saying, why?
It's a tragedy that people have learned to live with. That's the tragedy. I mean, that's the real tragedy, that you don't get upset to the point where you cry, or you're sad, or you carry this ongoing depression all the time. The resiliency of Black people living in this kind of situation is what keeps them going. So knowing that you have to depend on law enforcement for your justice, but yet and still not trusting them, is a dilemma. And the best way that I deal with it, and I think others deal with it, is that you keep hope alive. You keep thinking that maybe there's going to be people in law enforcement who are going to do the right thing. They do mean what they say when that we're all equal under the law. You hope for that. And every now and then you'll come across it, but it doesn't happen a lot. So I think that that's one of the tragedies that affects us all. And it also, I would like to say, takes the focus off of injustice for non-Blacks as well, because the insulation of attaching oneself to what happens to a white person in the same circumstances is something that Blacks are living with as well. If you're insensitive to one of your own, and you learn how to adapt to that, for someone who's not one of your own, it's much easier to do that. And that, in the whole scheme of things, is a tragedy.
A lot of people look at me and wonder how I cope. How do you keep smiling? How are you laughing? Why aren't you at that, at his gravesite every day? I don't want to get caught up into that because I'll lose my mind. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there because I don't want to go to the other side. I want to try to be, I want to still be like Mark, uplifting, because Mark would say, don't do that, don't do that. And I want to try to keep things positive in his name.
He was a role model for his own dad.
Amen.
I think he was always aware that the best teachers, and in many respects, Mark was becoming a teacher, that the best teachers teach not just from what they know, the facts, whatever they may be, but the best teachers teach from the force of personal example. They teach from the extent to which they are compassionate, the extent to which they are enthusiastic, the extent to which they encourage and support those around them, the extent to which they have clearly articulated values and ideals, and then they live them. And yes, all the book knowledge and Mark, political science and sociology and psychology and multicultural and gender studies, and then all the street learning that he had. You put all that stuff together, but he made sense of it because they were values-based, and he walked the talk.
When I think about Mark, it'll always be how he touched us. I remember somebody once said, "How did he die?" Which I think is significant. But the person said, "No, but I would rather tell you how he lived." I know that I could probably project for a long time what this country lost. But it's what he inspired in us in the short time that he had. None of us know what that time looks like. I remember Mark Twain once said that there are two important times in our lives: the day we are born and the day we find out why. I think in those moments, in that short moment that we were with Mark, and the things that he accomplished at his college, where he spoke the truth and really cared about different causes. In that short period of time, how many of us can say what we left behind? We talk about what we're going to do in the world, but Mark did it at Chico State. I think perhaps it will never be about the future of Mark himself, as it is how everyone experienced him and his death and what they will do with their lives because of his murder. That will be his legacy. That perhaps he will speak through them and even myself. No more different than Martin and Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and Mother Teresa and Mahatma Gandhi. I think it's sad that so many of the people that inspired us and made us feel like life was worth it have been killed. But I guess, like everything else in life, is what we do with it. When I was thinking about Mark more recently, I was thinking of a story. When President Nixon knew he was going to lose the election to this young upstart called John F. Kennedy, and that he went downstairs to the kitchen to make a sandwich because he knew he was going to lose. And in the kitchen there was this young Latino busboy. And Richard M. Nixon looked at him and he said, "So who are you voting for?" And the young Latino boy said no. But the president persisted and said, "No, who are you really voting for?" And the young Latino boy said, "The other guy." And Richard M. Nixon wanted to know why. And the young Latino boy looked at him and said, as he hesitated, "I'm voting for John F. Kennedy because he makes me feel good about myself and he makes me feel good about others." And I think that's what a leader should be. That is what Mark did for us. He reminded us what was good inside of ourselves. He reminded us about the illusions and the deceptions and the way we edit our voices, or the way we don't want to look at the full history of our lives. And then he made us want to feel good about everyone else around us.
It was like watching a star burn out. You know you're going to have that memory. You know that that impression is still left in the universe. it can't help but leave an impression. But you're just so sorry for the loss of the light.